Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is John Leonard. I'm chairman of the Milton Board of Appeals. I want to call to order this hearing of 16 Amer Road on June 8th, 2022. The meeting was supposed to start at 7 p.m. It's about 7:20, and I'm participating via telephone because my system has kicked all of the video portions of Zoom off of my computer for whatever reason. So as long as everyone can hear me, let me say that the purpose of this meeting this evening is to hear from the applicant represented by Attorney Jesse Schomer regarding a revised set of permit submissions that was dated June 8th, 2022, submitted to the board and circulated to the board and published by Crystal Rich on the board's website. We have present this evening board member Brian Conley, and Mr. Conley's participation is telephonic, and we have with us Jennifer, and she is present on the Zoom system. So let me ask Mr. Schomer, let me welcome you back to the Board of Appeals, Mr. Schomer, and apologize for the delay in the hearing.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Chair. No need for the apologies whatsoever.
Well, it's very frustrating because it was on the system and we were ready to start the hearing, and all of a sudden it clicked off and I'm not able to get back onto it. So, but I certainly am glad to have you back again. And I think perhaps the best way to start the hearing is to give you, to thank you for the revised permit application. The public has had a chance to review this since it was published on the website, but for the sake of our record here, let me give you the floor, and why don't you make your presentation regarding the revisions, and we'll see if the board members or members of the public have any questions. I can report to the board that our two peer consultants, Sean Reardon, Vice President of Tetra Tech, and Cliff Bomer of our architect, Davis Square Architects, have made some small comments. Neither is able to attend the meeting tonight because they're busy at other meetings. But when you finish, Mr. Schomer, I'll read their comments into the record, and we can plan on how we want to proceed from there. So
Okay.
The floor, why don't you take the floor, Mr. Schomer? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just by way of preface for what we'll go through tonight, I've asked our architect and landscape architect and civil engineer to be here tonight to run through the presentation materials that we filed last week, as you mentioned, Mr. Leonard, and just to make sure everyone is aware of what that is and what it isn't. That the plan set that we filed is not intended to be a definitive final version of this project. It's not a final plan. It's not the most closest level of detail that we'll be presenting to the board. That filing set was meant as a concept of the proposed direction that we are proposing to take this project, with some revisions to the site based on the peer review feedback that we received from Mr. Bomer and from Mr. Reardon, which in summary, our takeaway from their comments was that there was a need to make better use of the area on the site by consolidating some buildings and creating some additional room for programmable outdoor recreational space for residents, and additional buffers to the residential neighbors to the rear and the right side of the site. So that's what the plan that we're going to run through tonight is the concept of how we are proposing to address those comments in I would say, a 10,000-foot level of detail. And if the members have any initial feedback for us tonight, and I look forward to hearing what you have to read into the record, Mr. Leonard, with respect to Mr. Bomer and Mr. Reardon's initial reaction to those. Following that, we would propose to fully refine the plans and to advance them to the level of greater detail that closer to what we previously presented to the board in the initial filing of this project. So with that, Mr. Leonard, I would propose to turn over the floor then to Mr. Loringer and Ms. Tomaselli of the architecture firm of Embark out of Boston. And just for the sake of the two of you members who are participating telephonically, I'll ask Tim to be as descriptive and vivid in his phrasing of the description of what he's showing on the screen as possible. So with that, Tim, please take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, members of the public. With permission, I will share my screen for those who can see it. Is that visible for everyone? It should be the existing condition survey that's up right now, slide 86. So just to kind of recap where we previously were, it's been a bit since we've last met. The site itself at the corner of Amber and Brush Hill Roads is about 40,000 square feet, just under an acre. It's about 150 feet deep, 270 feet wide. There is a single existing single family house on about the center front of the site. That's like a 2-story split level. And one of the kind of main features geographically of the site is the slope of approximately 15 feet from an elevation of 45 feet up along Brush Hill Road up to approximately 60 feet at the kind of southeastern edge of the property. There's also some fairly significant existing vegetation to the east, rear, and west of the property. To recap where we previously stood, I'm now showing the previous site plan here. So we have 16 total units. We had 16 total units, combination of 4 kind of single family detached 4-bed units at the front of the site, and then 2 groups of townhouses at the rear, 1 group of 6 2-bed units, and then another group of 3 2-bed and 3 3-bed units, for a total of 12 townhouses, 4 detached. And then the total bedroom count was, sorry, I'm doing math here. There were 18 plus 16, so 34, over 40 bedrooms total, with 31 total parking spaces for a ratio of 1.94. Some of the feedback we received from the board and from the peer review is just that the connection we were showing the main entry drive was off of Amber Road with a single driving lane down the center, but we were using Brush Hill Road as a secondary access point. And we kind of heard just with the kind of strangeness of that intersection as it currently exists. Putting that access point there was going to kind of complicate an already awkward existing condition. In addition to that, so we kind of went back and forth whether or not that was going to be a gated entrance, exit. Each kind of option that we settled on kind of had its own problems that were unresolved. The other feedback we heard was the site was kind of just too tight, particularly at the property boundaries where we had pretty significant retaining walls. And there was some concern about the existing vegetation along the property line, both on our site and just beyond the property line, in terms of impact of that and losing it as this kind of screening buffer. And then within the site itself, there were some concerns about kind of coordinating utilities and the underground drainage system with new plantings, and then just some general open space for residents. So we heard that feedback, and there's a kind of a series of kind of big picture revisions that we've made here. The first is to eliminate entirely the connection to Brush Hill Road. So that kind of helps out on the traffic issue in terms of all of the additional flow would now be going on to and from Amber Road, and not kind of changing the existing nature of that intersection. It also simplifies the grading by eliminating the connection. I can go over that more in the next slide when we get into the plan a little bit more. And then the other kind of major change we made was to consolidate the buildings and reduce the footprints. That allowed us to increase the rear yard setback, increase some of the side yard setbacks to provide usable outdoor space, as well as space for secure bike storage on site, which we previously weren't showing. And then we've also maintained a pedestrian connection to both Brush Hill and Amber Road, which is something that consistently came up. So showing on my screen now is just the revised site plan. So in terms of site access, we have shifted the entry drive over from the kind of southeast corner to the center of the site more, which allows us to maintain the kind of emergency vehicle and trash truck and delivery truck turnaround without needing that connection to Brush Hill Road. And if you look at a few of the kind of preliminary conceptual spot grades here, so we have that 45-foot elevation at Brush Hill Road and 62 feet at the kind of southeast, the east or northeast corner of the site, which is the highest point of the site. Previously, we had, with the connection to Brush Hill Road, we basically were holding the 45 feet and then sloping up as steeply as we could to kind of maintain just under 5% for the accessible sidewalk along the parking. What that did is basically we had to cut into the hill to maintain that slope, which was less significant than the slope of the existing grade, which created those kind of deep retaining walls to the rear of those rear patios. What we're able to do now, since that connection no longer exists, is enter the site off of a higher grade at Amber Road, slope up a little bit from there, and then from that kind of center point of the site, keep that 5% in each direction, which brings us to a grade of just under 60 feet at the eastern edge, which is comparable to that kind of high point of the site. So this townhouse group to the kind of top rear of the site is about at grade. And then to the west, we're able to get down to about 52 feet, and we will require a 5 to 6 foot retaining wall along the front there. But we can screen that with some vegetation. And that creates we think it benefits the development because it creates a physical separation from the recording in progress. I'll keep back there.
Someone needs to mute.
Sorry about that. So maintaining that, so having that grade change there creates a physical separation between Brush Hill Road and the development, both visually and just kind of presence-wise. It kind of reduces the impact of that traffic on the residents of the property itself. In terms of parking, we now have 30 spaces. We've maintained the 4 garage spaces at the front units, as well as the 4 tandem spaces that share the driveway with those garage spaces. And we now have 22 spaces along the rear and front of the townhouses. 20 of those are just standard surface spaces, and 2 of those are accessible spaces. In terms of the architecture, 2 things we did to kind of create more space throughout the site and reduce the footprint. The first is to take those 4 detached single-family units at the front of the site and combine them into a pair of duplexes. And the second thing we did was eliminate the 3 3-bed townhouses at the top right group, which reduces the overall bedroom count of the site by 3 and creates, because those units are wider than the rest of the townhouses, that creates some additional space we can work with kind of in the east-west direction. So that while maintaining a comparable setback along the east property line here, with the abutter at 20 Amber Road, that allowed us to double the space in between the 2 groups of townhouses from 15 to 30 feet, and also increase the setback along Brush Hill Road in order to from 18 to 25 feet in order to preserve an existing mature oak tree that's in that top corner. With the duplexes, we were showing about 16 feet in between the single-family detached units previously. So by combining those, we're able to free up more than 30 feet there, and then increase that the setback at the front site along Amber Road, directly adjacent to 20 Amber Road, from 40 feet to over 60 feet, while moving the drive aisle kind of to the center of the site, as previously noted, which creates a fairly large open space there that we programmed for resident use. And then with the space in between the two townhouse groups, we've added our bike shelter. Additionally, we previously had two groups of 6 townhouses. We've shifted one of those that was in the western group to the eastern side to create a kind of unbalanced 5 and 7 grouping now to align that open space with the driveway entry and with the property directly adjacent at 220 Brush Hill Road to kind of reduce the impact of those buildings on that property as much as possible, while also kind of keeping the mass of that directly adjacent townhouse grouping as to reduce, as Mr. Bowman had called it, the kind of wall of townhouses there, to reduce the length of that. In terms of the kind of site elements, as noted, we have the, Natalie, our landscape architect, can go into this in a little bit more detail, but that open space in the bottom right corner would be a combination of hardscape and lawn space and some seating areas. We have relocated the trash, which was previously along the eastern property line, to the western side to kind of get it away from the adjacency to that open space, where it will continue to have an enclosure screen and then additional vegetation to screen. And then we have our sheltered bike storage kind of right off of the main entrance here, with additional visitor bike parking on mounted racks and additional seating area adjacent to that. We are showing an accessible sidewalk connection to the existing, sorry, let me back up here. So we do not have currently, there isn't currently an existing sidewalk at Amber Road. There is along Brush Hill. On the previous plan, we were extending the sidewalk on Brush Hill along Amber Road and using that as a front door connection for those single family units in order to kind of have the front door of those units be on Amber Road, similar to the rest of the context of the single family homes on the street. So we weren't turning our back on the street. So with the duplex units, we're continuing that approach with the parking to the rear of those, and then creating an accessible connection to that new sidewalk along the entry driveway, which can then be used for access to Brush Hill Road. We have additional connections directly from the parking area and the sidewalk along the townhouses to the sidewalk of Brush Hill Road via stairs, because there's about 5 to 6 foot grade change there. And then at the open space, we do have a small, more of a decorative fence. It's not really a screening fence, it's more security. But we will have a gate in that with direct connection to the sidewalk at that point. We also are showing a screening fence along the entirety of the east and north property lines. We were also previously showing private decks or patios to the rear of each townhouse unit and each detached unit, and we will maintain that as well. One thing I wanted to note, and I forgot about noting, one of the other things we did on the layout, kind of in the north-south direction, was reduce the depth of the front yard setback, as well as the depth of those front units. And that allowed us to increase the depth of those tandem parking spaces, which were a little bit tight at first, and also increase the depth of the sidewalk. So the concern of the bumper overhang was reduced. We now have a full 5 foot sidewalk there with additional few feet of small plantings before the actual townhouses. And in doing that, we were still able to increase the rear yard setback by 3.5 feet at the left group of townhouses and 5.5 feet at the group to the rear right, while also not requiring the retaining wall that was previously there. So we can both maintain much more of the existing vegetation for screening and provide new plantings there, where previously we were mostly hardscape and retaining wall. Last slide here for me. I just wanted to show a couple precedent images of what we were imagining on some of these outdoor spaces. So that bike shelter, that's kind of, it would be partly, this is a kind of standalone structure we're showing in this image here, but we're imagining something comparable that's incorporated into the side of the building architecture, but is largely just a roof structure to protect the elements and some kind of security enclosure to make them secure, but still feels relatively open and not like a large, just monotonous walled off building. And then for the open space, we have a combination of kind of lawn, seating area, fire pit. And I think these areas here, these images kind of show comparably sized spaces. And then finally, adjacent to the bike structure, we are showing a bike fixing station, which I think is a helpful amenity for the residents. So with that, we have a few landscape plans. I can turn it over to our colleague, Natalie, to kind of run through these in a little bit more detail.
Great, thanks, Tim. Thank you, members of the board. My name is Natalie Adams. I'm with Verdant Landscape Architecture, and I'm going to present the landscape site plan. Tim, what I'd like to do first is just take a walk around the public realm, starting with Brush Hill Road. So if you could, on the upper left corner, and you can zoom in there a little bit for me. Yep, so we're just going to go counterclockwise. There we go. So we have slated this 24-inch DBH, which is diameter at breast height oak, to be preserved and protected. And as we move down the sidewalk, concrete sidewalk, you'll notice there's a transformer there. And we also have large evergreens that buffer those townhouses. Then we get to the steps, and those are concrete steps. You know, I'm showing right now 14, but if it's 6 feet, then the number could vary to 12. And we have the site wall right there that holds up that six feet, and that is being screened there with evergreen, large evergreen plantings, maybe something like a white pine. And we also have two at the Brush Hill roadside, two deciduous street trees, which would contribute to the public realm on the Brush Hill side. And then we continue with the evergreen buffer planting in front of that site wall. And we're also preserving and protecting that 24-inch oak on the corner. So as we turn the corner onto Amore Road, we see there's another street tree, and this is contributing to the public realm on Amore Road. And just zoom into those duplexes for me, Tim. So right out front of the duplexes at the sidewalk connections, we have a nice ornamental shrub and perennial planting with 2 ornamental trees, flowering natives. And the public sidewalk is going to curve around into the site, offering a nice sidewalk connection to the site. And we're going to go across the crosswalk, and in front of the other duplexes, you'll notice the same type of plantings, ornamental shrubs and perennials, native varieties. And again, those small ornamental trees right out front of flowering variety. Then we get to the little gem. This is our amenity space, and the revised submission really, it's the star of the space. So we've got this great amenity space, pervious paving. What we're showing here is a fire bowl, Adirondack chairs, and an accessible picnic table, and an open lawn space. And this is for anybody to get outside and enjoy the outside environment, maybe lawn games, cornhole. I have a hammock there. That's that funny looking thing under one of the shade trees right there. And now the whole space is fenced and gated, and most of, with exception of the fence that runs along the property line, we've got a 4-foot picket fence to keep the little kids confined so they don't get in the way of vehicles. And now zoom them out for a little bit for me, Tim, please. So now we're going to look at the rear patios of the 4-bedroom duplexes, and these are pervious paver patios. And if you saw the last presentation, what we've been doing is eco gardening, and what that is it's using native plants to support the biodiversity of the neighborhood's birds and bees and insect populations. So we have those, and all of the patios that are unit pavers are pervious units, so the water infiltrates right into the ground system. And our second little gem on the site is this bike workshop area, and it's we've got Tim and Embark are working on a bike shed right adjacent to the townhouses, and we're providing this nice dynamic paving right there, and the bike fix-it station, and we're also populating it with some furniture, and we can further define that. And we're also showing our short-term bike parking spaces right there, right opposite the entry. Now, I'm going to go out back of the townhouses right now. And on the ones on the sheet left side, those, because of the grade change in the back, we're showing those as decks. So there's a little distance between the deck and the ground. And in between each unit is a screen. So you have some sort of privacy, visual privacy between each unit. And the ones on the right side are, again, pervious unit pavers, and those are at grade and showing some privacy there with a screen in between each. And then between the property line and each deck or patio, we're showing a line of dense shrubs and of small ornamental trees as well to buffer. And right beside that, behind that bike area, we're going to have a nice large shade tree. And this, depending on, we could have a nice evergreen tree if that's what was warranted, rather than a deciduous tree. Now, just to look at the parking lot for a second, we've got the trash area to the left, and we have room for two big trees down there. And then to the right, we have two more trees. One is part of the amenity area and one is off to the side there. And I think I hit everything. I have two more pages, and they just kind of give you snapshots of the type of vegetation we're looking at, and also a snapshot of our potential plants in the planting list. And what we're looking forward to forthcoming is a fully defined plant list and planting plan for the site, as well as a lighting plan, and those are both forthcoming. Thank you.
Tim, is that the end of your slideshow?
Yes, we do have the turning analysis that was presented to the fire chief that kind of shows the new configuration. But I don't believe we have transportation on the call to go over those in detail.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you, Tim. So just to go back to that, Mr. Chair, we have met with the fire chief, as Tim mentioned, and have shown him an earlier version of this plan and got some initial feedback from him, and it was favorable. And that was what set us on this direction to redesigning the site with the layout approximately what you're seeing tonight. So we'll, of course, once these plans get advanced further, we'll be going back to Chief Madden and discussing this to get his feedback and sign off with respect to the access on the site. But as Tim mentioned, unfortunately, our traffic engineer is not available tonight to be on the call, but the slideshow does include several slides showing the auto turn analysis that the Milton's largest fire vehicle can access the site, as well as box trucks, garbage collection vehicles, and vehicles of that nature. But that concludes our presentation tonight, Mr. Chair. As I said, this is intended as a conceptual overview only, and the plans will be refined to a much greater level of detail moving forward. But we wanted to present this to the board to give you an update of our progress responding to the peer review comments, the feedback from the members, and Attorney Corcoran and his clients, as well as other members of the public. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you for questions for any member of our team.
So I'm not sure if we have John on audio, but I have a couple of questions. First of all, thank you so much for the thoughtful revision and for the presentation this evening. It certainly does address, I think, a lot of questions we had earlier, including about recreational space and pedestrian walkways. One thing that we mentioned before that I didn't hear mentioned in the presentation was a location for snow or snow removal process. And I was wondering if that was given any additional consideration.
Yes, a couple. So one of the things that we were able to do and you can jump in at any point if you want, Natalie, but one thing we were able to do by relocating the trash to the opposite side is just there's a much more space over here than there was previously. So the area beyond the sidewalk here up against the fence, as well as the island here at the corner, are both areas that were previously needed to be kept clear to access the trash, can now serve as snow storage, and the extension of the driveway here beyond the parking itself.
Okay, great, thank you. And then secondly, not a question, but just a comment. I expect there'll be a more detailed plan and then also a traffic analysis, right, that has to be redone because it's all shifted around. So I look forward to that and understanding how the new proposed entryway impacts both the residents of this new development and the residents on the street. So thank you.
Giselle, can you hear me?
I can, Brian.
Great. I just had a couple questions also. When the conceptual plans are advanced to the next level, will there be a plan that commits to which trees are, preserved and which new plantings will be made? Will it be this plan in front of us now or something like it?
Hi, this is Natalie Adams. I can answer that. We do a tree preservation plan. We did one for the previous submission. This one's very, very similar to the one we've already submitted, but it does need some revisions, and that is on our list of things to do. Thank you.
Okay, great. We'll look forward to seeing that. And then it looks like there's a buffer of trees just beyond the property line. Is that actually contemplated that there'll be a wall of kind of green buffer on your neighbor? It looks like it's on your neighbor's property, or is that just kind of artistic license?
Yes. So I'm sorry to interrupt, Brian. It is a bit of artistic license, but the property sheet top, there's nothing really to speak of beyond the property line besides some large gangly shrubs. And the further you get, as it starts to go up the slope, it starts getting more populated with where the ledge or erratic boulders start showing up. That's where, yes, that diagram shows it, where, yes, a forested environment starts showing across the property up there. Yes, that's what it looks like. Yes, but our tree preservation plan would show that a bit more clearly. The renderings tend to take some artistic license into them. Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I think the renderings, that's a lot of license there. So I think the renderings would be more helpful to kind of show what we think it will actually look like when it's completed. And then the retaining wall. Two things. I think the rear setback behind the townhouses, did I read the plans correct that they went from 13 feet to 16 feet?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, so the retaining wall now is 6 feet at its maximum height, or it's 6 feet running its course?
So I guess two things. So yeah, we went from 11 and 13 feet at the two different townhouse groups to 16 and a half feet across the whole rear townhouses now. And there is no longer retaining wall behind them. Previously, they were set at a lower elevation than the existing grade.
I see.
Along the rear property line, because we were maintaining a 5% grade
I see.
as you climbed from Brush Hill Road to kind of maintain that accessible sidewalk.
I see.
Yeah, because we're no longer making that connection at Brush Hill.
So you've elevated the whole site to raise the units up to meet the grade of the abutting properties.
We're essentially, we're not cutting into the grade like we were previously. We're kind of setting at the existing grade. We're kind of utilizing the existing grade where it currently stands at this point.
Okay. And then the public space at the, I guess you call it the south corner of the property. What's like a rough dimension of that area?
Sure, that's 60 feet long. Tim, you'll have to help me by how deep it is.
I can grab that right now.
Thank you.
So it's about 50 feet from the property line to the face of the parking. And then what we have shown inside the fence there is about 40 feet.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks very much.
And then there's an additional signs on top of that from the property line to the road itself is about another 15 feet.
Got it.
Where we are showing
Great,
some
thank you.
additional new connections.
Thank you.
So I don't know if our MATV partners are listening in. It looks like I'm looking in the attendees list. We have a couple phone numbers. I don't know which of those may have been John's phone number. And then it does look like we have a John Leonard in the attendees. Does anyone remember what John's phone number was? Was it this 326 number?
Yes, that's correct. It was ending in 326.
So
John, John is the 326. I've asked him to unmute, but I don't know if he's getting the prompt or not.
He wouldn't be getting a prompt if he's on the phone. He's going to have to manually do that by pressing, I forget if it's *6 or *9.
Yeah, *6, I believe it is. Maybe I should try giving me a call again. Oh, there he is.
He's got,
So, John, if you're on both your computer and your phone, you may need to shut one of those off. I think that's where that echo is coming from.
Okay, I just promoted him over.
I don't know if we'd still be having the problem. I mean, I see him there. I don't know if he's able to function on the site. I don't know why he had to go to the phone in the first place. It looks like, well,
He was having Wi-Fi issues, I think. That's why he signed in with his phone. He should be okay now, it looks like.
I can see him. I can see his clock moving. John, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, great. Well, I've been on board here for about the last 15 to 18 minutes. So I've been able to hear and to see Miss Adams' presentation and most of Tim's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And subsequent to that, I asked some questions, as did our fellow board member, Brian Connolly.
Right, and I picked those up and thought they were very, very helpful.
Excellent. Thank you.
So if I'm back in the session, at least verbally, I don't see what I have on my screen is I have the revised building footprints, but let me do this. Let me see if Mr. Corcoran has any questions of Tim or Miss Adams.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure I have any questions at this time. I just did get access to this material today on the website. I thought I was supposed to receive advanced copies, so I'd have time to review in advance. But in any event, my initial impression is it's still too dense for this location at a very busy and dangerous intersection. And I think there's a long way to go in establishing how this site can be managed safely relative to its proximity to this three-way intersection with vehicles traveling at high speed through it. It's a very narrow stretch of Amor Road. Adding sidewalk, I suppose, is helpful for pedestrians up and along the frontage here, but it's still a narrow stretch of road. And it strikes me that at least for the four-bedroom units likely to hold larger families. They're likely to have more visitors, and those visitors are likely to park in front of those buildings along Amor Road, which will create safety issues along there, as I see it. With the rest of that, I look forward to seeing much more detailed plans and having time for me and my consultants to review them and comment on them more specifically.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ned. Let me ask Tim Sawinski whether he has any questions about the presentation this evening or the status of the project.
No questions as of now, Mr. Chair. I had been sitting in on some of the working sessions that the applicant had with Sean Reardon and Cliff Bomer, as well as the fire chief. And I think I passed along some just real first blush comments from both Sean and Cliff. I think, they agree that, as we often say in these hearings, that things are moving in the right direction. I think we still need to see some of the more detailed plans, what the effects on the drainage system are. for this project. We'll want to get that auto turn analysis into Chief Madden's hands. I think he generally felt that the concept that we're working with here with the single sort of middle drive into the parking lot was a workable solution and preferable to some of the other options that have been presented throughout this process. So yeah, we'll look forward to seeing. I know that both, once we have some more detailed information, we'll have Cliff and Sean, draw up some detailed comments that I'll want to get in the hands of other town staff members. I think generally there are a lot of good things happening here. I think the sidewalks are an underrated public benefit of this project. We don't have nearly enough sidewalks in this town, especially leading to that amenity, across Truman Parkway at the Neponset River Greenway. I think the secure bike storage is going to be a draw for this project, and I think it's going to go some way towards mitigating the traffic issues relative to car ownership. I think one of the biggest things that kind of prevents people from taking the plunge into bike, commuting or maybe one car ownership per household is the availability of safe and secure, storage. And so I think that's a really good benefit of this project. And so I think they're making some good moves. I think that obviously the any additional steps that can be taken to kind of mitigate that condition along the back property line with the townhouses. There's probably, there's only so much that can be done if that's going to be the typology, but obviously it's something that's, new and different in this neighborhood. And we'll want to make sure that, screening and buffering is done to the maximum extent. I think losing the retaining wall is good. When you're not messing around with the land as much. I think that's a generally positive move. And I know it's not necessarily a new innovation, but I do appreciate that each of the units has, albeit maybe a little small in the townhouses, but it does have, everyone has private outdoor space, via patio. We've been talking a lot about kind of shared outdoor space for kids to play in and people to gather, which I think is very important. But I think, having that private, outdoor space for each of the units is a really good draw especially for a rental project with affordable units. I think it's going to be, if they keep that up, that'll be a nice benefit for the residents here. So I think, again, just to put another fine point on it, we'll want to see, more worked up diagrams. We'll want to see more worked up, details and reports to get into our peer reviewers' hands. But I think the project's moving in a good direction. And we'll have probably some more detailed comments from town staff once we have some more detailed information from the applicant.
Great. No, thanks, Jim. That was very, very helpful and optimistic. Crystal, let me ask you this. Is there any member of the public out there who has their hand raised and may have a question for M. Bach or Natalie Adams?
No, I don't see anybody right now, John. Oh,
Okay.
I take that back. Hold on one second. Let me promote. I am promoting someone over right now.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, this is Vesper Gibbs Barnes. I'm the president of the Neighborhood Association, and I do appreciate the attempt at the improvements, but I'm still continue to be concerned about the density as far as the property is concerned. There seems to be still way too many units for the size space. And in addition to that, the attempt at the solution for the traffic is a good one, but because I live very close to where the site is, it's a very intense turn from Brush Hill Road to Amro Road. People basically come on here full speed, not even braking. So I've had to take my life in my hands for on occasion, leaving my home. So I think that the amount of traffic they're talking about bringing in by having that many units is just going to increase an already very serious situation. And that's the extent of my comments right now till I have a chance to review it further.
Great. Thanks, Ms. Barnes. We appreciate your comments, and I'm sure the applicant will take them to heart. And stay safe and be careful.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, Crystal, anybody else out there in the public sector who has their hand raised to ask a question?
No, not right now.
Okay, great. Let me go back to Mr. Schomer. This is, I think, been a very helpful proceeding despite my technical difficulties. Let me ask you this: the next scheduled hearing on this application, according to our preordained schedule, is Wednesday, June 29th at 7 o'clock. And I guess my question is that sufficient time, Mr. Schomer, for you and your consultants to continue their refinement of this project and be prepared to make a further presentation, and obviously confer with our peer review consultants, or do you wish to have additional time?
Thank you, Mr. Leonard. Our team were talking about that very question earlier this afternoon. Typically, it's the lead time for completing these plans is several weeks, particularly with updating the stormwater management calculations on the civil engineering side of the project. So what we try to do for a full plan resubmission like this, we want to get this into your hands and the peer reviewers' hands and available to the public at least a week in advance of the hearing, which would be 2 weeks from tonight. And 2 weeks, unfortunately, it's really just not quite enough time to get that done. So what I would propose, Mr. Leonard, would be that we skip over the hearing scheduled for the 29th of this month and go straight to the next one, which I believe is tentatively scheduled for July 20th. That would be a 3-week extension, and I'd be happy to submit a letter extending the board's time to act in conjunction with that extension so that you don't have an issue with the constructive approval or anything like that. And we would propose to come back with the full plan resubmission submitted to you for your review by a week in advance of that hearing, which would be July the 13th. That would be a 5-week period of time, which would be more than enough, I think, for us to complete the updated plans. And it would also theoretically build in some time for us to have a further workshop meeting with the peer reviewers. And I think that would be beneficial for us as well. So that would be my proposal, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that seems to make a lot of sense to me. Mr. Corcoran, do you want to be heard on that timing schedule? Is that convenient to your busy schedule, or do you have a better suggestion to?
No, that's fine. You jump right over my anniversary, and so it won't upset my wife in that regard.
Okay.
The schedule's fine. Thank you.
Let me, I don't know that Judy Barrett is present. Is Judy in the audience tonight?
Yes, Mr. Leonard, I'm most certainly here. I just don't have video on, but I do now.
Well, okay. Thank you very much. You're doing better tonight than I am. Let me.
Not much, John.
All right. I don't know. Now I've reappeared. I've resurfaced. I've arisen. How long I'll be here, I don't know. But let me just ask if we went over to the 20th with a submittal date of the 13th, from your perspective and your dealings with Mr. Reardon and Mr. Bomer, does that sound reasonable to you?
July 13th, is that what you said?
Well, the submittal would be made to the board on the 13th, the revised submittal after the applicant is conferred with our 2 peer reviewers.
Well,
and the next hearing date would be scheduled for July 20th.
Yeah.
At 7 p.m.
I would think that would work. I'm not aware of why it wouldn't.
Okay, all right.
I mean, I want to check with with Cliff and Sean, but I don't see a problem. That's plenty of time ahead to plan.
Well, I think it is, and if unfortunately with summer issues and family vacations and all of that, if that date becomes inconvenient, and we can just bump it a little more to get the hearing, because I think we're making substantial progress during these interim periods of time. So,
Mr. Leonard, I can email both of them tonight and just
Okay.
kind of tell them we're going to need them, to be available for July 20th, with the understanding that they'll have materials to review in advance, et cetera.
okay, that'd be great. So they'd have the materials. They'll have the revised plans of the applicant, and presumably they're going to be in some type of a discussion with the applicant and their respective experts well before the 13th. But the plan should be revised by then with a formal public presentation on the 20th. Does that sound sensible to you, Mr. Schomer?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Let me just ask my board members, Giselle and Brian, is there anything else you need to cover this evening?
Nothing on my end.
Nothing from me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And I have nothing further. Mr. Schomer, do you have anything further you want to add before we adjourn this evening?
Well, nothing to add, Mr. Chair. Just I would be remiss if I didn't ask if you had any questions for our team before we go off and further refine the plans, or any feedback for us.
No, I think the feedback is that I think that there's really a good faith effort taking place here to improve the project and yet keep it economically viable and reasonable. I think that the reports of both Sean Reardon and Cliff Bomer indicate, which are on the record now, that the project has been responsive to their requests, and the changes, they quote, universally positive. So all of that, I think that's very high marks, and it's indicative from my perspective of a good faith effort to reach a sensible solution to this project. I think, as Mr. Corcoran has indicated, all of these projects have some type of issues, and he's pointed out his concerns. I know you'll take them to heart in good faith and try to deal with those in some sensible manner. And I don't actually recall whether Mr. Corcoran at this stage of the proceedings has introduced any expert testimony or expert reports, but if he does have them or is going to have them, I think he'll share them with you, hopefully, so they can be considered and dealt with in a good fashion. I think the project has made some major changes here, and I think I'd like to take this and move it forward towards resolution of all of these issues, so we can move on and not have endless hearings on what may be smaller issues rather than the significant issues which you've addressed in the revised plan. So I'm in an optimistic state of mind. How about you, Mr. Corcoran?
I'm not so optimistic, Mr.
I didn't
Chair,
think you were.
and I did submit an earlier expert report early on based on the initial set of plans. There's significant change here. My experts are going to need access, just as the peer reviewers will need access, and they're going to need time to respond. I will file those reports as soon as I can when they're ready, and I'll have experts prepared to be available to testify on the night of the 20th as well.
Okay, great. Is this time schedule reasonably consistent with your busy practice and the time that your consultants need to make appropriate comments?
It all depends how quickly we get access to the completed plans. We do have concerns. I'll take the conceptuals and get them going on those, but there are a lot of details to evaluate that I think are going to be pretty significant, particularly relative to the density of the site and the ability of the site to hold all of what's being proposed.
Okay, well, we certainly are forewarned regarding your concerns, and I think hopefully the applicant will take some of these concerns to heart in its continued revisions of the project. So, yeah, if there's nothing further that anyone wants to posit or say, what we'll do is we'll adjourn this hearing until July 20th at 7 p.m. With the expectation that on or about July 13th, revised plans will be submitted to the board with hopefully a copy to Mr. Corcoran and his experts so that they can review those and comment on them. And if there's obviously any opportunity to have the revised submittal completed earlier than the 13th, I think that would probably be welcomed and be helpful to Mr. Corcoran and his clients. So with all of that, my apologies for my technical issues here. They've been cured. Crystal must have done something magical to restore my computer, but thanks for putting up with the delay, and look forward to seeing everyone on the 20th at 7 p.m. So we're adjourned for the rest of the evening. Yeah, and have a great 3 or 4 weeks.
Thank you. You as well. Happy 4th, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.